All right, so welcome everybody to our webinar. This is actually our fifth webinar that we've done in the last couple of weeks, so I'm pleased to see we have another big crowd of over 100 folks on, and this is a webinar on visual systems for young learners. We're very excited today to have Patty Boheme from Little Friends, and for those of you that have been in the field for a while, you know Patty's been doing this for as long as I have, and we'll let everybody guess how long that is. But we're very excited to have Patty today as our presenter, and we'll be hearing from her here in a couple of minutes. And today's moderators are myself, Ted Burke, and I'm the director of the Early Intervention Training Program. And we also have Maria Maddox, and Maria will be our moderator not only for this, but for all 17 of our webinars. So we're very excited to have Maria on as well.
I am the Executive Vice President of Little Friends Center for Autism, and I've been at Little Friends in the field for a very long time. One of the great parts about my job is that I not only work with children, but I also work with adults. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor by trade. I'm approved through DHS as a behavior therapist. In addition to that, I was early intervention credentialed for a long time. And currently, even though I'm an administrator, I still do clinical work with children under 3, as well as I work on consults with school-age kids and with adults. So I kind of see where folks have started when they're really little and where they're going, which has just really helped me a lot just to better program for the folks that we serve here at Little Friends. We service about 800 children and adults with autism and developmental disabilities. We have 3 therapeutic day schools, and we also have about 120 people that live in the community that are adults, and then we have adult day services. Our Center for Autism, which is 10 years old, and that's where we do a lot of diagnostics on really little kids, but also on adults. We have probably one of the best clinics across the country. We do the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, the Autism Diagnostic Interview. We do cognitive testing and speech and OT, so we do a real comprehensive workup. We also at the center do speech and occupational therapy. We do a lot of parent training. We're lucky the autism program gives us some funding to do free parent training. So I'm going to give you a resource to get on the internet and be able to see what training we do. We do applied behavioral analysis with young children. We do consultation, social skills groups, support groups for parents. We have visual systems on our website, and that's a lot of what I'm talking about today. So please visit the website because I think that will help you with some information. We do a lot of early intervention training so that you can get credits. And so what you should be taking a look at is our email system. And if you check at the bottom when you go on the website that you want news and updates from Little Friends, but then also training and news from Little Friends Center for Autism, then you'll hear about our trainings. We actually have a early intervention core training coming up. If you want to take note of this, on April 17th, the 24th, and 25th, we're offering 17 credits. It's 3 days. And some of what I'm doing today will be elaborating on, but I'll be having it online on our website probably starting in March. But you can also call us, to save a spot. So hopefully we'll see some of you at that training. I'm kind of excited about there may be people in the audience actually that I know, so I'm hoping some of you are out there. This training is young visuals for young learners, and so we're talking a lot about visual systems, and probably one of the most famous persons with autism is Dr. Temple Grandin. And she's written books, she lectures, she also is a professor on animal sciences at Colorado University. But I'd like to start with this quote because I think it's a really good one, and I know when I saw her speak probably 25 years ago, she just really impacted me on better understanding how people with autism view the world. And what she said is, I think in pictures, words are like a second language to me. I translate spoken and written words into full-color movies, complete with sound, which run like a VCR tape inside my head. When someone speaks to me, his words are instantly translated into pictures. And what I think is a lot of people are visual learners. We know that people with autism tend to be visual learners, so that's really important, and that's part of why I'm doing this workshop today. So my first question is, how many of you folks in the audience consider yourself visual learners?
So this is another poll, folks. So go to that poll function, that fourth icon under your name that has either the checkbox or a letter, and identify yes or no as to whether or not you consider yourself a visual learner. Give folks another 15 seconds or so. Looks like we're getting lots of responses. Another second or two. All right, Ted, you want to give us some results here? And it looks like an overwhelming 70, oh, I'm having a hard time reading. There we go. 78% of you say, yes, you are. You do consider yourself a visual learner. So, Patty, you want to take on over?
Okay, so that's pretty, so that I have a feeling that this is going to all make some sense to you. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is that words are fleeting. So once you say a word, it's gone. They basically disappear. Where pictures are concrete and allow us to process information. So if I say in an auditory way to a child, first puzzle, then computer, my words are gone now, and probably they may have only heard the word computer. And so they may be upset because they are going to obsess on the computer. But if we actually have a picture of the puzzle and then a picture of the computer, that stays so that they can refer back to that. Not that they're going to be happy with it per se, but when you use visuals over time, the children begin to trust those visuals. One of my favorite examples, because this happens to me all the time, is that have you ever had a situation where somebody is talking to you and all of a sudden you think, I have no clue about what they just said to me. And so that happens to us a lot, but what we can say is, can you repeat that? Where what happens with our kids is they just get frustrated. So the purpose of this workshop is to provide training on visual systems that I have found to be really helpful in structuring your sessions, structuring environments, whether it's at a daycare, on the playground, at home, and to really help the child, the therapist, the parent, the provider with organization and communication. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping for you to get out of this training. One of the things that I found with visuals, which we'll be going over the different systems, is they really provide consistency for young children. And what happens actually in social service in general, whether it's with children or actually adults, is that people throughout their lives change. So if we can provide them with some type of a system that they can trust and rely on, then that's really going to help them as far as staying grounded and feeling, less anxious and more stable about their life. So we like to think about the systems can stay even though people leave. One of the things we believe is that visual systems can change with that child's life, so that visual schedules can be different types of schedules. You'll start out with very simplistic schedules in early intervention, but they're going to get a little more sophisticated when we go to early childhood and up through their life. One of the nice things is when we introduce visual systems in early intervention, it really helps the child get ready for early childhood because many early childhood programs use visuals. They use schedules and a lot of choice systems. I feel very strongly that the systems we'll talk about really will help with providing predictability, choice, and control. These are the three words that I use a lot when it comes to behavior management. If we can predict our world, if we can control our world, and if we can make choices, we're going to be a lot happier. And I think that applies to the children that we serve. So I'm hoping the training that we're going through right now is going to give you some tools to work with the little ones that you're working with, and it doesn't matter if they have autism or developmental disabilities, and honestly, if you have the little ones at home that don't have disabilities, some of these systems will be helpful for them. I'm going to be talking about how and why to use them. One of the favorite things that I like to do in many of my trainings is say, tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to have autism for the rest of your life. So think about someone that you know, and that's going to be you for the rest of your life. So I want you to think about this throughout the training and what you would want for people to do for you, and maybe how some of the tools that I'm going to talk about actually might really help you. Now, this is a visual training, so I'm going to have you actually write your own schedule out so you'll have a sense of how far we are in the training and when you'll be finished. So if you've got a pencil and paper, let's have you write your schedule. So the first thing you're going to write is concerns and challenges. That's the first activity. The next one is you'll write down what you like to control, predict, and choose. The third one is going to just be the words choice, predictability, and control. You put these in little boxes like you may see on the screen. And then the last one is evaluations and goodbyes. And then every time we finish one of our sections, I'm going to have you cross it off so you'll know where you are in the training. That'll give you a sense about using, it's kind of like a lot of you use checklists that you check off. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what types of concerns and challenges are you having with the children that you work with? And one of the things I'd like you to think about is how these things in the respect of choice, transition, control, and predictability. So let's kind of get some feedback in the chat boxes, I think that would be, on challenges that you're having with the children that you're working with in early intervention.
All right, so use your chat box to share some of the challenges that you're having. We'll give folks a minute or two to have an opportunity to write their responses in. And it looks like we're getting some good ones. So Patty, we've got some shutting down behaviors, short attention spans, staying on task, motivation, breakdown around transitions, completing tasks, difficulty with self-regulation, running away when the activity is challenging. Ooh, lots of them coming in. Tantrums, non-compliance, behavior issues, clinginess to mom and caregiver. Let's see, perseverations on certain toys. Lots of different responses.
Okay. So a lot of these do have to do with choice, predictability, transition, and the control. If a child is not completing a task, it may be because they don't understand when that task is going to be over. They can't predict how long it's going to last. They may not be able to know how to make choices, so they really get upset because they can't communicate to you what they want to do. A lot of times we see a lot of tantrums from children because bottom line is they can't predict their world, they can't make choices, they can't control their world, and so we see a lot of behavior problems and dysregulation. You may cling to mom because you don't know if mom is coming back. So the types of visual systems that we are going to use are going to help a child be able to better understand some of those things. Transition for children is very, very difficult. Change is very difficult. A small change like the fact that you're bringing in a new toy and you're not bringing back the old toy could be could just completely throw a child off. You could bring in a different Mr. Potato Head and that could throw that child off. So if there's a way that you can, not that they're going to like it, but if there's a way that they can understand that, no toy today, we might show a picture of that toy and cross it off, but that, that they're going to be able to get that toy maybe later at the next session somehow. So there's a variety of ways that you can begin to deal with those issues. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I'm trying to think if there's anything else there. With the clinging moms, like I said, is, you may have a little schedule where actually what we're going to do is they're going to do certain activities and they see a picture of mom. That the fact of that sometimes they don't know which therapist is coming today. Well, some of the things that can be really helpful is having a picture of what therapist is going to be coming today so that they know, so they can prepare. Or maybe there's a new therapist, and so that child sees that the old therapist picture is no longer, but the new therapist is on there. Are they happy? No, but eventually that they will be able to deal with it better because they're able to predict who's coming. So those are just some thoughts. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to cross off on your schedule concerns and challenges because we are done with that piece. All right, so my next one is, what do you like to control, predict, and choose in your life? So I also want you to chat about this. And one of the things I like to tell people is that, this comes from my counseling background, when we empathize, we put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And so the idea here is to start putting ourselves in the shoes of our child and how they feel. So what I want you to do is, what do you like to control, predict, and choose? Let's make a list of that, and let's take a look at that.
All right, we'll give folks a couple minutes to respond, and we're already getting some good answers. And normally I'd be reading off names, but they're coming in so fast. So it looks like a lot of folks like to plan their meals, like to have control of their meals and their daily task and work schedules. Sleep, schedule. Looks like food, sleep, schedule. Money. Money is another one. Who's coming in to see me? Workouts. Income and bills. Free time. Free time's another. Caseload is another response here. Let's see. Relaxation, food, work schedule. Hobbies. All right. So looks like
okay, these are wonderful.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, can I kind of comment on this? So this is huge because what we control and predict in our life and choose in our life provides a lot of quality, and this also pertains to the children that we work with. And so what a lot of people will say is things like, food is always a big one. It's definitely one of mine. My favorite foods are pizza and ice cream. But the thing for me is pizza is not just about cheese pizza or pepperoni pizza. It's about like Giordano's pizza. And so when we get into choices, what happens I see as children get older and they don't have a lot of communication skills is that they never ever really get what they want. They may have been somewhere where they had that thick, cheesy pizza with buttery crust, but they have absolutely no way to be able to tell someone that that's what they want. And can you imagine that kind of a world? And that's why it's so important with little kids is to start really working on the ability to get them to communicate and make choices. And we'll get into this with pictures in a little while. Things like what you wear. Some people like cotton champion sweatpants and some people like slick polyester. Just think about not being able to choose the type of clothes that you wear, or the fact that you're stripping all the time because you really can't stand the fact of polyester. It bothers you. Some people like clothes that are heavy. Some people like clothes that are light in weight. This has a lot to do with choice and control, which is really important for us. One of the things I know I've seen kids who are, throw a fit every time they get into the car and into the car seat. Well, it might be this is a really hot kid and that, they can't say, I'm hot. Or it might be a child that gets cold really easy. In our offices, two of us have our space heaters going all the time, and the middle person in the middle office keeps their window open. So, think about, again, a world where you could not control those things or make choices about those things. Where you go, how long you stay. That's a big thing for me is like if my husband decides that he wants to, we go to somebody's house, well, I'm one of these people that gets up at 5 in the morning, but then I'm exhausted by 9. It's like I always want to know how long are we going to stay? And that's all about predictability. And a lot of you said schedules. We heard schedules. And that's part of what this presentation is going to be about. We're going to get into that. So pretty much what I'm saying to you is that we need to provide this for even these really young kids. All right, so let's think for a minute. When you think about the young kids that you work with, and you folks do phenomenal work, you're working with these very young kids that really need your help desperately. This is like the time to work with these children, before the age of 3. What can the children that you work with choose, predict, and control? So let's think about that for just a minute. What can they, your little 2-year-olds, what can they choose, predict, and control? All right, so I've asked this question because I've done this training in some other types of formats. And this is the answer that I get is children with disabilities cannot choose, predict, and control anything. And so what happens is you have some very, very upset little ones because they just don't have any control over their world. One of the things is people think about, well, 2-year-olds, typical 2-year-olds, they don't have a lot of language. But the thing that's different between a typical 2-year-old and a child with autism or developmental disability is they are so much better at reading environmental cues. They can gesture to communicate things that they want. They have joint attention, so they can look at their mom and they can look at the thing that they're interested in and look at mom to see if she's going to come over and help them with that. They have tremendous ability to use their facial expressions to communicate. In fact, actually, 55% of the emotional meaning of a message comes from postural, gestural, and facial means. And so little ones at 2 that don't have disabilities really can communicate so much better. They can make choices, they can predict their world, and they control their world a lot better than our kids with autism and developmental disabilities. So now what I want you to do is to cross off what do you like to control, predict, and choose off your schedule. And I know you all like schedules because I heard that, so let's cross that off. Okay, the next thing that we are going to move on to is how can we help with using visual systems through choice, predictability, and control. Okay, well the first thing I want to talk to you about visuals is I love visual systems. But you are in homes, you are out there in daycares, you're on the playground. So the first thing you want to do when you are using visuals is to make sure your provider and that your parent is open to using visuals. And one of the things that I recommend for you is that when you're working with your providers and with your parents, explain why they're helpful. One of the things that a lot of parents are fearful is that, oh, I don't want to use pictures because then my child won't talk. But what we know is that by using pictures to make choices, that very often seeing those pictures actually facilitates language. We ran an early intervention autism program for, I think, about 15 years. And probably about 90% of our children, which varied in ability, actually, once they started to use picture systems, they had come from other places where they weren't using them, they started to talk. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to talk that uses pictures, but it's not something that's going to stop that child from talking. So we do want to really explain why you're using them. What you can do is you may want to use some of these visual systems I'm going to talk about for a while, and then once you know how to use it, then what you can do is ask the parent if they want to use it, because you want to make sure that it works and that it is going to be something that you know how to teach that parent. Never overwhelm a provider or a parent with all the system I'm going to talk about. You don't want to go in and say, okay, here's a tab board, first, next, then board, choice board, and throw all these things at them, because what will happen is they will just shut down, and so will the child. So what I typically do is I start with one system at a time. And then once they're comfortable with that and it's working well, then you can move on to other systems if it's appropriate. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at our first visual system. And this is a this is a little mini first, next, then board. And what schedules are about, in my opinion, is they're all about predictability and control. So when you're using a board like this, and there's a lot of different ways that you can make it, but this is kind of a picture hopefully that will help you, is that you're going to put up to 3 pictures on here. When we're working with children in early intervention, we typically use photos, but I highly recommend that you use the team members, because a speech pathologist might say that, this child actually does better with black and white line drawing. So, make sure that the picture representation that you're using is something that they understand. With the first, next, then board, like I said, is you can put 3 pictures on here, but you may only start with 2. You may only start with 1. And I'll show you another schedule board where actually you can start with just 1 picture per page in a minute. But let's take a look at this one, because this is one that a lot of therapists that I work with really, really like. So when we look at this, this is a little mini schedule, and you can have a mini schedule within your session where you're actually putting pictures of the activities that you're doing on there, so puzzle, shape sorter, or the wiggles. So that's kind of like within your session, or if a mom's working with a child, or you're at the daycare and they need to do certain things. The other thing is using it for an environmental schedule, and that's to help transition from environments. So the one that you've got up here is a picture, and these are actually line drawings, of course, not photos, but photos are great to use. First we have toilet, and we're going to wash our hands in the bathroom, but then we're going to move to the kitchen to have our snack. All right, so we can see here there's 3 different environmental things here. So first we're going to do is we're going to set up the board with our 3 photos on here, and we've got our toilet, our wash hands, and we have our snack. So you're going to set that board up for the child. The next thing that you're going to do is you actually are going to verbally review with that child the schedule. So what you will say is, first, toilet, next, wash hands, and then snack. Now, one of the things that we do is we frequently will have the parent or the provider, when they're saying first toilet or bathroom, whichever one is appropriate for the child, we will either take that child's hand if we can and point to the picture, so that's a better way to isolate it, or we will point, okay? And that can be helpful. A lot of children then will start to point on their own, which helps them focus. The third thing that we're going to do is that after that child is done with an activity, is that we're going to remove the picture. So when they're done using the bathroom, we take that bathroom picture off, and we put it in a stop pocket, so then they see that wash hands is next and that snack is next. And then what happens is that when all of these photos are in their stop pocket, the schedule is done. So after wash hands is done, it goes in stop, and after snack is done, it goes in stop, and then we can add other pictures. So that's kind of the process for using the first, next, then board. If you take a look, here's an example of being in the community. And so what we have here is a picture of the doctor visit. So maybe we're going to see Dr. John, and then we're going to go to McDonald's, and then we're going to go home. So we go to Dr. John's, and then when that is over, we put it in stop, and then we're going to say to the child, McDonald's, and then home. After we're done with McDonald's, it goes in the stop pocket, and then they can see that all that is left is home. Now, I'm not going to say this is magic, that when you use schedules that all behavior problems are gone, because they're not. But you would be surprised over time when you start using predictability systems that it really does help a lot with behavior. So one of the challenges that we have is that a lot of our children with disabilities and autism, and if you have little ones at home, we have a lot of problems with things like waiting. We have problems like transition, so if we have to come in from the playground. One of the things, kind of like I talked about earlier, is if you think about it, if I say to someone, you know, sweetie, we're going to go to this is Mom, we're going to go to the doctor's, Dr. John, then we're going to McDonald's, and then we're going to go home. Now, what do we think they're going to really hear? Well, they're going to be hearing the word McDonald's. So when we get to Dr. John's office, what's probably going to happen is we're going to have one really upset kid because your words now are gone, and all that they have is a picture of the golden arches in their head. So what you tend to do is, no, honey, first doctor, and then McDonald's, and then home. Well, what happens is, all of a sudden, your words have gone from words to rah, 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 because that kid has just got McDonald's in their head. And so when you're saying, Doctor's McDonald's home, it's something like, and so little Charlie Brown pops up, and you've got one very upset child on your hands. But if they see pictures, then they know that Dr. John, they actually might like Dr. John, that they can see that that's first. And then when that's done, then we're going to go to McDonald's. I remember this in our early intervention program. I had a mom, and she was desperately trying to get her child to sit down. And she kept saying, sweetie, sit down. You know, all the other kids were sitting down, and her little one was like jumping around and running around. And one of our staff gave her a sit picture. And miraculously, that child looked at that picture and they sat down. Because what happened was there was a lot of things going on in the room, and he was excited to be there. And Mom's words just really, he had a hard time paying attention to, but when he actually saw that concrete picture, he responded right away. So, you know, pictures can be wonderful. And so, you know, those are just some examples of ways that we can deal with some of these challenging issues by using visuals. This is a schedule book, and this is actually the same schedule book that we did use in our early intervention program, and we do use in our schools for some of our more impaired kids, and it is one picture per page. How this works is we may put 4 pictures in here, 3, we might even put 5 in there, and what we do is just like we talked about, is we will review those pictures, we'll flip through the book, and we'll verbally review them. But then when it's time to do the activity, they're just going to see that one activity per page. And for some children, they don't scan well. They may see something on that first next then board, like the computer, that they will obsess on, so they do better if they just see the one picture per page. So this is another schedule system that might be helpful. The next one is a top to bottom schedule, and this is a lot of what we see in our early childhood programs and and beyond our early childhood programs. And so, you know, this is with some of our kids that we work with here at the Center for Autism that are under 3. Some of our kids actually do very, very well with this type of a schedule and even line drawings before they're 3 years old. Not everybody, but this type of system sometimes does work for them. One of the things sometimes that I hear this a lot is, oh, he knows his schedule. You know, he just knows that, you know, he doesn't need a schedule. What happens is children frequently know routines that happen on a regular basis. But a schedule is very different from a routine, because what a schedule does is it incorporates changes. Even the smallest change can set a child off. Like I said, is that you didn't bring the right Mr. Potato Head. And so, you know, there are little changes in a schedule or big changes in a schedule that if a child gets used to looking at that board, they can predict what's going to happen, and that is very, very helpful for them. So, again, it helps with organization. It helps predicting what is coming next, how to regulate yourself based on just knowing what is going to happen. One of my favorite things is that I bet a lot of you out there use planners. I can't believe it, but I actually finally went to an iPad planner, which I never thought I would. I used a paper planner for years. But I bet if I was to say to any of you out there, can I just borrow your planner for just a few hours? I have a feeling that you may not want to give it up, because we really depend on those. And one of the things when it comes to schedules if you think about going to a conference, you looked at that schedule for the conference one time, right? And you know it. But do you only look at it one time? No, you refer back to it over and over. And one of my favorites is if you go to a big Catholic wedding and it's long, you look at that order of service from that wedding over and over again, even though you looked at it because you're thinking, when is this going to be over? And what it does for you is it regulates you. So, that's a little bit more of a perspective on why I think schedules are so important, even for little ones. Okay, so when we have a top-down schedule, just like the other schedules, we're going to first set it up for that child. Then we're going to review that schedule verbally with our learner. So we've got the wiggles, and then mom's reading, and then we're having pretzels, and then we have bathroom. Then what we do is we do the activity. That child does the wiggles, and then when wiggles is over, we put it in stop. And then when everything is off that schedule, we know that we are done. So we may be done with your session. We may be done with preschool. Mom may be done, with our morning activities. So it looks like I have a little break here for questions and comments.
We do. Patty, there's been a few questions that have come through. One of the first ones that came through a little bit earlier was the question about how to deal with parents who reinforce inappropriate behaviors. So you've got the schedule and the parents are providing kisses for hitting and things like that. How would you address that in this system?
In the schedule system, as far as, so what they're saying is the mom is reinforcing inappropriate behavior. Is that it?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Okay, so I'm not sure what that behavior is. In a schedule, I don't know that is per se going to help with that. But what, in the most kind way that you can say to a parent, and what I usually use is I always use myself as an example, is that, what we try and help our parents understand is if a child is, we'll say, hitting a sibling, for example, if that mom winds up giving that child a lot of attention, even if it's where they're, upset with their child, but they're giving them lots and lots of attention, what we say is that that actually may be increasing this behavior. And so, what you need to do is you might, when the child is really upset, remove them and have them go to a quiet place. And that way you're not, and don't talk, you need to have a very neutral, calm face. And try and help to give a lot of examples of how how behavior can be shaped by attending to that behavior. Now, what I tell people is when I talk to parents, I tell them examples of how I have completely blown exactly what I teach. So one of my favorites is that I tell parents that for kids that have eating problems, is you're not going to run around the room and chase that child to try and get that child to eat. But what happens to us is that as parents, we have this guilt chip in us, and more than anything, moms want to feed their kids. And my son, who is much older now, of course, but he was adopted. He's from the Philippines, and he had eating issues. I broke every single rule that I teach about how you're supposed to deal with eating issues, that you don't, that you don't give the kids only the foods that they're going to want, that you don't, feed them at all sorts of odd times just to get them to get, stuff in their stomach. So, when you're teaching behavior management to families, if you can use yourself and say how hard it is to, to do these things, not to reinforce behaviors, it's extraordinarily difficult, but if you cannot attend to these behaviors, that they're more likely to extinguish themselves if you can be consistent. So I don't know if that helps answer that question. It's kind of a long behavioral answer. But a schedule per se is, what a schedule will do is it's going to regulate a child. It's going to help them predict what's going to happen. It's one of many things that we need to deal with behavior problems.
All right. That That sounds like a great answer. Another question that came through was just keeping motivation, and I'm not sure if it's motivation for the child or motivation for the parents, and even just finding the right motivating item to keep the child interested in the tasks that have to be completed at hand. So can you address the motivation issue?
You know, what's great with a First Next Then board is that what you do is you find out what that child absolutely loves. And so what you're going to do is you may have they do something that they don't like as much first, and then they get to do something that they love next, and then you're going to put something they don't like as much, you could just do two pictures actually, so you use like a first and then a next. So you would have the undesirable activity, then the desirable activity, then the undesirable, then the desirable, and we actually have that work extremely well. So first I have to complete the puzzle, and then I get to use my iPad. So I can see that I have to do the puzzle first, then it comes off, and then I get to use the iPad. So actually, to be honest with you, we work with 2-year-olds here all the time, and that's exactly what we use for motivation. It's really, really helpful.
Patricia was also asking about the ever-changing motivation. So how do you keep up with the, what works one day doesn't always, won't work the next. So how do you keep up with that?
Okay. Well, one of the things I will say is when you use visual systems, and whatever kind of schedules that you're using, consistency is by far my best recommendation for behavior management and in general is consistency. Schedules provide a lot of consistency for kids, which helps. As far as the motivation goes, what you need to do is you always want to look for anything that they like. You want to talk to mom. You want to ask if grandma, there's things that he likes with grandma. So you need a priority list of things that are motivating. The other thing that you do is, because sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, he has no reinforcers. And I'll be honest with you, I was doing an ABA program, and this child had there was nothing that we could reward him with because, mom didn't know of anything that was going to work. So what I did is I went and got all sorts of treats at the store, and it turned out like Snyder's pretzels and Rolos were two things that this kid could die for. But so you have to really, it's not easy, but you have to do some things to introduce some new things to see if they may like them. So, it's tough when you're having trouble finding motivators. You can't depend on the same thing, obviously, you know that. It's kind of like when we have kids that drop off foods where, they like macaroni and cheese, so then mom gives them macaroni and cheese every day because she's dying for them to eat, and then all of a sudden they don't, they'll never eat macaroni and cheese again. So we have to get a variety of things.
All right. Another question from Jessica has to do with what if the child isn't understanding a picture schedule? Would you recommend using an object schedule instead?
Yes, that's a great question. It's definitely, you can use an object schedule, which basically you would put, that you might put a thing of soap if they're working on washing their hands in one of the boxes, and then you might have goldfish crackers, and then you'd have a puzzle. So you can definitely use that. And what we do is we will put a photograph also later on that object box so that we can then try to see if they're beginning to understand the picture. So that can be helpful. Yeah, we use that. I'll be honest with you, some kids do not get pictures, but in my experience, which just because I'm so, I've been in the field so long, I'm kind of, a little bit older here, so most people get pictures. Some don't. I definitely see that, but most do.
Okay. A couple more questions and then we'll move on. One question is how do you talk about transitioning from one mini schedule to another mini schedule? How to kind of build those on each other?
Okay. Okay, so what you can do is you can have 2 boards. You could have a board, like we'll have 2 boards where one is like an environmental schedule, like if we're going to go to the kitchen or their bedroom, and so you have 2 different boards. You know, you can have that. First and extend boards, or you can use, when I showed you the book that's one picture per page, you can actually build in activities and environments in there. So what you might have in the book is several pages that show, like I'm going to do a puzzle, then I'm going to do a put in task, and then there's actually a picture of going to the kitchen and in that book. And so then I go to the kitchen. Then I'm going to go back to my bedroom, and then I'm going to do a couple more activities, so you actually can do it that way. Some kids, what we will do is they may match pictures to an environment, so we may put a picture of the kitchen outside of the kitchen, and then they have to match that off their schedule board. You know, they have to take that picture and match it to the kitchen or match it to their bedroom as far as environments. That's another way that you can do it.
All right,
okay?
Awesome. We're going to ask one more question, and then we'll move on, and we'll have an opportunity to ask the rest of those questions at our next break. Well, one of the questions from Ellen has to do with how to help parents stay motivated in using these systems. That parents say they're going to use them, and then after a week or 2 get very frustrated, and then the system kind of disappears. So how do you encourage parents to continue to use a system that takes a while to learn?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. You know, the simpler the system can be, the better. One of the things that I will tell parents is that you know, is, for example, I'm going to be talking about a choice board just next, but what I will tell parents is that, you know, that they will say, oh, he won't use the pictures at home. Yes, they use them with the therapist, but he won't use them at home. But the thing is, if that child understands the juice picture and he's using it with a therapist, what I tell the parent is, you know, that what you have to do is you're not going to give him that juice until he gives you the picture, because that picture has to have power. And so sometimes what it is that the parent doesn't know how to use the picture system. And sometimes, bottom line, folks, what happens is that they have 3 other kids, and they're having a really hard time, you know, using that picture. Some of our families are creative and just delightful and play with their kids, but they're not very organized individuals, and so they lose things. I mean, that's the reality that happens, and so it's really important that we always support the families, you know, even if they're struggling to use them. What really helps is when parents see they work. And so I really like to start, I'm going to get into choice boards. Choice boards, even if they use one system, like a choice board, for example, or just a schedule. And if we say, okay, Mom, you know, let's just try this one thing, or when I go into the tab system, you know, let's just try this system and see if they can be successful with one thing. And I think, you know, one of the things, too, is, you know, a lot of times what parents will say is that, you know, I know what he wants, you know, because he takes me there. And so they may not want to use the picture system. The problem is that we'll tell parents, as I know, and you are so good with him, it's just that you're not always going to be there. And so that we need to give him a functional way to communicate to other people, whether it's a babysitter or grandma or other people in his world, in a very kind, supportive way to try and help them understand that.
Thank you so much for your questions and your responses, Patty. There's still some other questions that we're going to address later on toward the end of our session. There's been a lot of comments and a lot of suggestions for folks to use with each other, so I appreciate that. So, Patty?
Okay, great. I know this is not easy. You guys are out in the field, you know, you're in homes, you are in so many different environments, you know, trying to do the best with the families and the kids. I will say, having done this for a long time, is that I see much better response from parents today with the visuals and people using iPad choices. It's much better than it was, we'll say, 10 years ago. People are much more receptive than they were. I think our world is so visual, and so people are getting more on board with it. The next thing is a choice board, and a lot of your parents aren't going to have a picture exchange communication book. That's the book that many people use to put choices in. And so what we've used for many years is just a simple file folder, which we draw with a magic marker, 4 squares. And for this, what it is this is a way to offer picture choices. How, some of the basic ways to teach it. Number one is I highly recommend that you attend a PEX training, picture exchange communication. I think they've done a really nice job of teaching how to use pictures. But what we do is we will start out with objects, and just to know that that child can actually make a choice. So, I don't like bananas, so I show you an apple and I show you a banana. And if you take the banana, I'm going to give it to you, and then when you're not happy, I'm going to wait a minute, and then I'm going to reset it, and then I'm going to put that apple much closer to you so that you take it. And then once you understand that, through trials of different things, that child knows how to make choices, I'm going to start to pair photos with those pictures. And for most children that I have worked with, and because of my longevity here, is just a lot of folks, most of the time they get the photos. Now you're going to see our I want strip on there. That's the third phase of PEX where we do I want apple. You're not going to need to use that right away. You may not use it at all. I don't really care if you use an I want strip right away. If you can give me that picture of that apple or that juice, that's great communication. So, this is a good way to start. You want to document the things that the child likes. You want to keep a list of those. What we do know about that kids with autism, and I'm going to speak about kids with autism, I know this happens with kids with developmental disabilities. A lot of times we have children that do have words, but it's very hard for them when they're stressed out to get those words out. So a lot of times, even with our kids that are talking, we are still using pictures to help them make choices until they become comfortable and fluent. Like I said, is we're going to go from the objects to the pictures, and then we can start to add more choices on. It's amazing when you see kids with these picture books and they're under 3 and they're flipping through them and they're pulling things that they want, and they have limited verbal skills. You definitely highly recommend using your team, work with a speech pathologist, work with your parent. The next picture just shows you, you can start with 2, simple 2 pictures. And it is so exciting to see kids start to make choices. I mean, I've got some great videos of little ones, who are just starting to use picture exchange, and they're just like, they're so excited and giddy about and laughing about being able to get what they want by offering a picture. So, because remember what I talked about when I said, think about a world where you could never, ever get what you want. And what I do see in adult services are people who have no way to communicate and have lived a life where they really never could get exactly what they wanted, which is very sad. So I think today we have much better chance, even with our folks that are going to have limited to no verbal, to be able to get them ways to
Patty, I just want to interrupt for just a second here. And there was a question that kind of fits right in here, is how do you deal with a child who shakes their head no at any choice because what you've presented is just not what they want?
Okay. Well, that's something to work on, and those are the hard ones, is you have to find out what they want. One of the things as far as when, even with your parents, if your parents are working with you, if your child is a little bit, a little bit hungry, and so, that if you're trying to get them to choose a snack, but they've just ate a big meal, then they're not going to be really motivated to use that. So what you really want to do is think about the things that they absolutely really want, or try and find it, because you can't make a choice if you're not presented with what you want. So you got to figure out what that is. I'm not saying this is easy either, but you got to find out what is going to actually be a choice. Okay?
Yes, thanks.
Great.
All right. So I'm going to move on to predictability. I'm kind of watching my time. And what I have is a number tab board. This is one of the favorite systems for therapists that have used these systems. One of the things in the training we were going to do is we have a mini book of visual systems, and all the systems that I'm showing you are actually you get in the book that we do the training with. But this is a real favorite. And what this is a tab board can be used for anything that is number-based. It actually can be used for something that is time-based too. So like as far as number-based, it might be how many times I get to go down the slide at the daycare. So I'm going to flip up maybe 5 of those. When I'm talking about time-based, it might be that I'm on a swing and I might use a tab board, or I actually might put my fingers up, 5 fingers, and I say you have 5. And that it's not 5 minutes, it's not 5 seconds. It's usually, not too many minutes. But then they can see my fingers or the tabs going down, so that when I see 3, they know they're going to only be on that swing, till, I'm halfway through, and then 2 and 1, and then we're done. So again, this is about predictability and feeling that sense of control when something is going to be over. So when I'm using a number tab board, the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to figure out, what I'm going to use it for. So what I need to do is come up with, how many, whether I'm using it food, like how many bites of food or how many puzzle pieces that I'm going to use it for. So the first thing I need to do is define that activity. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the correct number of doors. So let's say that I've decided that I want to have my child put 4 pieces into a puzzle. So I'm going to open 4 doors. They're going to put in 1 puzzle piece, and I might have to do it to begin with hand over hand. And then I'm going to flip that 4 door down. So the child knows I have 3 left. Then he puts in another puzzle piece. Now I have 2 left. Puts in another piece. I have 1 left, and now we have stop. This is something that I have to say that we just have a lot of success with kids. For them to know, how many things. And it might be some of your higher functioning kids, it might be like they have to do 2 puzzles or 3 puzzles. They have to complete 3 small puzzles. And again, like I said, is anything that is number-based is really helpful. If you go on to the next page is, after they complete each activity is, of course, the last thing that they're going to see is the stop sign. And this gives that child a real sense of, of regulation, because they can see. This is great, for things that kids like and don't like too, because if I don't like something, then I know I only have to do 2. If I love something, I prepare myself that it's almost over. So it's actually not only a system of predictability, it also helps me transition that this is almost over, whether it's something I like or something I don't like. So the next picture that you see is a little one who doesn't look very happy, and this is an actual story where we had a mom in a training, and her little one was not a good eater, and she was really trying to get her to eat some apples. And so what we did was we said, okay, we want you to take, cut up an apple in the smallest possible piece that you can. And what we're going to do is go home, and you're going to use your tab board. We gave her a tab board. This was a parent training. And you're going to flip up 2 tabs. And that what you want that child to do is just say just 2 bites. So mom, the apple was so small that the mom actually got the child to eat it, and then she put down the tab system. But once the child realized that then, oh, wow, I only have 1 more bite, the child took the next bite. So then what happened was the mom did this for a couple days, and then she started to increase it to 3 bites and 4 bites, and before you know it, she was able to get this child to eat apples. It was very, very cool. So a lot of it is that whole idea of, knowing. Like if somebody said to me, okay, I want you to get in shape, so go start, go start running laps in the backyard. it's kind of like, well, how many and when am I going to get to stop? But if I only have to run 2 laps and I can see this one's done and then the next one, you know, it's a lot easier to deal with. So that's that concept. So we use these a lot. Okay. All right. The next thing that I want to talk about is something that's a little bit different. One of the things that we really emphasize in early intervention is social. We want you to have those kids looking at you and you looking at them, and lots of smiles and claps and just a lot of things going on, a real emphasis for families. But the thing I'm going to talk about today is definitely do that, but I'm going to talk about a way to teach independent skills using a least restrictive physical prompt level or method and not talking. So in our experience, when we're teaching a skill that we want you to do at 30 completely by yourself, things like using your fork and taking a bite, washing your hands, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, hanging up your coat, anything that we want you to do independently, what we do is we use physical prompts and we don't put in the verbal. Because what we see a lot is with children, you know, as they get older, you know, we see this in early childhood, we see this in the schools, is that they become extraordinarily prompt dependent. People with autism kind of learn in wholes. So what happens is they build the verbal in and they build you in. So what we'll see is children who won't, when they're washing their hands, they stand there and wait for you to say turn on water, you know, dry your hands. And so what we've done for many years with a lot of success is that when we teach a independent skill, we prompt from the behind, and it's really nice because with the little ones you can use 2 hands over the top of them, and we actually don't talk. When you use a physical prompt, you can make sure that child does whatever you're wanting them to do correctly. If you put in a verbal prompt, what happens a lot of times is they do it wrong and then you correct it. And with a lot of our children, they really don't know what's right and what's wrong. So what they might do is they might tap let's say tap the faucet or the handle to turn on the water. And you say, no, don't do that. And then you show them how to turn on the water. And the next time that they go to turn on that water, they'll tap it, say, no, and then turn it on because they really don't know what's right and what's wrong. But if we put in a physical prompt to show them how to turn that water on, and then we fade that prompt out, then they're going to know how to do it. The problem is when we teach verbally independent skills and we're in front of that child, we become part of the task, and so do our words, and then it's very hard to fade ourselves out. So what we've done for teaching independent skills is that we have a physical prompting system. So it's called the least restrictive prompting system. And so what it is, and I think I got time to do this, is we're going to do this together. And this doesn't have to go in the order. What's important is that the child is able to do each step of the task successfully. So, if we're doing hand washing and we may be doing hand over hand. So to start with, what I want you to do, this may feel a little bit odd, but I want you to take one of your hands and I want you to put it over the other and get a good grip on it. And this is hand over hand, and I want you to put your hand on your head, all right? So you've got a lot of control here, all right? Now what I want you to do is I want you to put your hand over the top of your wrist, and I want you to put your hand on your head. Now you've got your hand on your head here, but let's put it down. Now what you can do is you're holding your hand here. Now what you can do is pull the hand that you're holding straight down, okay? Now if you put your hand underneath your wrist, all right, I don't know I hope this is making sense, if you go to push down, you can't. So what we tell people is for kids that are trying to get out of a prompt, whether you hold it on top or underneath may give you a little bit better control. And more than anything, you are dealing with tiny, tiny hands, so you need to be very, very careful. Then we get into a mid-arm prompt. So take your arm and your hand and grab your mid-arm. So now if you put your hand on your head, you still have some control, right? You do, but that child better be really knowing what you want them to do. When we move to an elbow prompt, you're really just kind of hanging out with them and giving them a little bit of support. So if you touch your elbow and get your hand on your head, you don't have, they should really know how to do what you're trying to get them to do. And then when we move to an upper arm, you're basically in a shoulder prompt, we're really just hanging out with them, and then we get into proximity prompts. Sometimes you have a sequence where you're teaching a child to do something and they always seem to make a mistake. We'll say maybe when they go to turn off the water, I'm going to say, and so you kind of hover over them to make sure that they do it correctly. Now, these are not for social things. These are for independent skills like I talked about, getting dressed, using the toilet, those types of things. But I'm telling you, this is one of the best ways that we've been able to get children who are pretty impaired, actually, to be able to do things independently. Okay, the next one is going to be our start and stop mat procedure. Now, you can use this and be in front of the child or in back of the child. We use this when we're teaching independent skills because what's going to happen here is that we have our green mat, which is where we're going to put activities, and we have our red mat, which is basically a stop area. And this is where we might want to be teaching children that are ready for this to do some activities on their own and then put it into stop. So what you can see here is what I do is I put some activities on my green mat, and I'm going to teach that child through a prompt system to get that toy, to play with it, and then to put it into the red stop area. Now I can do this, like I said, is with that child in front or behind, but when you start, you're probably just going to have one activity on the green mat, and you might do this over and over again. But again, it's that consistency for that child, and you would be surprised how many children can begin by the time they turn 3 to be able to do a little bit of activities on their own using like a green start mat and a red start mat, or we love green start baskets and red stop baskets. So that's another a little system that might be helpful for you. So where we're at right now is we're going to put our choice predictability in the stop pocket. And so we're almost done. And my last question for you, and this is always one of my favorites to ask, is tomorrow that you're going to wake up and you're going to have autism for the rest of your life, what is most important for you, for people to do for you? And so, you know, start chatting up a bit about that because it'll be interesting to see what we hear. And we're really pretty much winding down. We're going to, I think maybe, I'm not sure if you're going to give a few more questions, but the next is going to be evaluations and goodbyes in a minute. So you can really start to take that off your stop pocket. And I'm going to be turning this over in a minute to Ted and to Maria. So I think we're pretty much closing. I didn't know if we had time for any more questions or comments. I know your lives are not easy, and I'm not saying that this is going to work for everyone, but I hope it is really helpful. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Patty. And Maria, we could probably get like 2 questions in if you got 2 of your.
Yeah, it looks like we do. Patty has pretty much addressed a lot of the questions as she has presented, but there was one question from Jennifer as to what system do you recommend starting out with and why do you think it's a good one?
You know, that's a great question. You know, it depends on the child. It really does, because sometimes I want to start out with a choice system because I want to just get that child to start to make some choices. You know, any of these I feel that you can try with a child. You know, some kids really need that. First you do the yucky task, then you do the really great task. And some kids are just, you know, we really know that they're ready to start communicating and they're not talkers, and so we want to get pictures going because that may facilitate talking or just lower frustration. You know, it really depends, I'll be honest with you, on the child and on you and what, you know, you think, because you guys, you and the parents really know this kid the best. Parents are amazing. And so, but you know, you're working with this child, so I would pick the system that you think's going to work and that you're comfortable with.
Much.
Thank you.